The morning started like any other. Emma hugged her daughter, Lily, before sending her off to school. But today was different. Today, Emma had an unsettling feeling in her chest, one she couldn't shake no matter how much she reassured herself. Lily, a bright and resilient 10-year-old, had been blind since birth. But that never stopped her from living life with an infectious smile. With her guide dog, Max, by her side, she navigated the world with confidence. Still, as a mother, Emma often worried. Were the teachers patient? Were the other kids kind? Did Lily ever feel alone? These questions haunted her, so she decided to try something new. That morning, before Lily left, Emma gently strapped a tiny camera to Max's harness. It was a simple way to peek into her daughter's daily life, a way to see the world through Lily's experience. She expected to watch ordinary moments, classrooms, laughter, maybe even a few innocent pranks between friends. But when Emma finally sat down to review the footage that evening, her heart pounded. The screen flickered to life, and what she saw made her hands tremble. The sounds, the voices, the shadowy figures moving around her daughter. Something was terribly wrong. Her breath hitched. A voice, sharp and unfamiliar, cut through the noise. Lily flinched. Max whimpered. And then something even worse. Emma's hands flew to her phone. She didn't think twice. She dialed 911. Meanwhile, across the city, a teenager named Marcus slumped into his usual seat on the bus, lost in his own thoughts. His life had been tough, bouncing between homes, struggling to keep up with school, working odd jobs to make ends meet. Today was just another long day, and he was exhausted. The bus jerked to a stop, and that's when he noticed her. A woman, visibly pregnant, struggling to keep her balance. Other passengers either ignored her or pretended not to notice. Marcus didn't think twice. Without hesitation, he stood up and gestured for her to take a seat. She smiled, grateful, and sank into the seat with a relieved sigh. "Thank you," she whispered. He nodded, offering a small smile before turning away, expecting nothing in return. But just before she got off the bus, she pressed a small folded note into his hand. "Read it later," she said. Marcus watched as she disappeared into the crowd. Curious, he unfolded the paper, eyes scanning the words scribbled in shaky handwriting. As he read, his breath caught in his throat. His hands trembled. The note wasn't just a simple thank you. It was something much more. Something that would change his life forever. But what did it say? Stay tuned. Emma's fingers trembled as she pressed the phone to her ear. The emergency dispatcher's voice was calm, but Emma could barely hear it over the pounding of her heart. She tried to form words, to explain what she had just seen, but her voice cracked under the weight of panic. "My daughter, she's blind, she has a guide dog. I put a camera on him this morning and I just saw something. Something's wrong. She's in danger." She forced herself to take a shaky breath, rewinding the footage, her eyes scanning the screen for anything she might have missed. The classroom looked normal at first. Lily sitting at her desk, her small hands brushing over her Braille textbook, Max curled up beside her. Then came the voices. Not her teachers. Not her classmates. A muffled shuffle. A chair scraping against the floor. Then a low, unfamiliar voice. Firm, not friendly. Lily flinched. Max let out a nervous whimper. And then, the screen tilted as if Max had turned his head sharply, focusing on something just outside the frame. Emma's grip tightened on the phone. "Please," she whispered. "Please send someone now." The dispatcher's voice was steady. "Stay on the line with me. Can you tell where she is?" Emma's eyes darted to the clock on the wall. If the footage was from earlier that day, Lily could already be home. But she wasn't. She had texted her daughter a while ago, asking if she was on her way, but there had been no response. Maybe her phone had died. Maybe she had stayed late for something. But after watching the video, Emma knew better. She grabbed her car keys. "I'm going to the school," she said, her voice firm despite the fear constricting her throat. The dispatcher hesitated. "Ma'am, officers are on their way. It's safer if you—" But Emma was already out the door. Across the city, Marcus sat frozen on the bus, his fingers clutching the small, crumpled note. His eyes scanned the words again, as if reading them a second time would make them less shocking. Less impossible. You don't know me, but I know who you are. You're not alone anymore. I want to help.
His throat felt dry.
The bus jostled over a pothole, but he barely noticed. His mind raced, trying to make sense of the message. It didn't make any sense. Who is this woman? How did she know him? And what did she mean by, I want to help? Marcus wasn't the kind of person who had people looking out for him. He had spent most of his life bouncing between foster homes, never staying in one place long enough to belong. He had learned to keep his head down, to survive on his own. His fingers ran over the paper again, feeling the rough edges of where it had been torn from a notebook. It wasn't just a random thank you. This woman had written it with intention, with meaning. He glanced out the window, his pulse hammering. She had already stepped off the bus, disappearing into the evening crowd. Should he follow her?
No.
That was crazy. But something in his gut told him this wasn't just some coincidence. And Marcus had learned to trust his instincts. He shoved the note into his pocket and pulled the bus cord, standing as the vehicle came to a stop. The driver barely glanced at him as he stepped off onto the cracked sidewalk. The street was busy, people rushing past him, cars honking in the distance. He turned in the direction he had seen the woman go, scanning the faces in the crowd. She was gone. But she had left something behind. More than just a note. A question. A mystery. And Marcus had a feeling he wouldn't be able to walk away from it. Emma's tires screeched slightly as she pulled into the school parking lot, barely putting the car in park before jumping out. The building looked the same as it always did, standing tall and quiet under the dimming evening sky. But something was wrong. She could feel it. She hurried toward the entrance, pushing through the double doors, her breath coming fast. The front office was empty, the light still on, but no one at the desk. The halls stretched ahead, eerily silent except for the distant hum of an air vent. Lily, Emma's voice echoed. She tried to keep her panic in check, but it was bubbling too close to the surface. She reached into her bag for her phone, ready to call Lily's teacher, when she heard it. A faint sound, muffled, from around the corner. She moved quickly, her footsteps barely making a sound against the tiled floor. As she turned a corner, she saw a door slightly ajar, Lily's classroom. Her breath caught in her throat as she stepped inside. Desks were pushed to the side. Papers scattered across the floor. Max's leash, trailing loosely near one of the chairs. But no Lily. Emma's heart pounded. She stepped forward, her eyes darting around the room, trying to make sense of what she was seeing. Then a voice behind her.
Low.
Unfamiliar. Looking for someone? Emma spun around. And everything went cold. Marcus' footsteps echoed against the pavement as he turned down another street. He didn't know what he was looking for, not exactly. All he knew was that his gut told him to keep moving. The note was still in his pocket, the edges damp from his nervous grip. He pulled it out again, reading the words over and over. You don't know me, but I know who you are. That part was the strangest. Who is this woman? And how could she possibly know him? Then something clicked. His last foster home. It had been years ago, but there was a woman, his caseworker at the time, who had always seemed different. She had cared, genuinely. She had tried to help, even when the system had failed him. Could it be her? His pace quickened as he reached the bus stop where she had gotten off. He looked around, scanning the street. A small diner sat on the corner, its neon sign buzzing faintly. A grocery store down the block. A few other shops with their doors locked for the night. And then,
there.
A figure, just ahead, stepping into a building's entrance. Marcus didn't hesitate. He followed. He didn't know what he was walking into. He didn't know if he should be afraid. But for the first time in a long time, he felt something else.
Hope.
But what he was about to uncover would change everything. And nothing could prepare him for it. Emma's breath caught in her throat as she turned toward the voice. A man stood in the shadowy corner of the classroom, his face partially obscured by the dim lighting. Her pulse pounded in her ears. Every instinct told her to run, to scream, to do anything but stand there frozen in fear. Where is my daughter? Her voice was sharp, demanding, but inside, She felt her body trembling. The man didn't move at first. He just stood there, watching her, as if weighing his next words. The silence between them stretched too long, pressing against Emma's chest like a weight. Then he took a slow step forward. "You shouldn't be here," he said, his tone disturbingly calm. Emma's grip on her phone tightened. She had already called 911. The police were on their way. But would they get here in time? Her eyes darted around the room. There was no sign of Lily, but Max's leash was still there, trailing across the floor like a thread leading to an answer she didn't want to find. "What did you do to her?" Her voice broke, but she refused to let the fear consume her. The man tilted his head, as if amused by the question. "I didn't do anything, but I know where she is." Emma felt like the walls were closing in on her. "Then tell me." Another pause. Another agonizing second where her heart slammed against her ribs. Before he could respond, the distant wail of sirens cut through the silence. The man's posture changed instantly. His muscles tensed, his eyes flicking toward the door. And then, without another word, he bolted. Emma's instincts finally kicked in. She lunged forward, trying to grab him, but he was faster. He shoved past her, knocking over a desk in the process. Papers flew into the air as she stumbled back, barely keeping her balance. "Stop," she shouted, but he was already disappearing down the hallway. Emma hesitated for only a second before grabbing Max's leash from the floor. If Lily had been here, if something had happened, she had to find out. She ran toward the door, her pulse thundering as she followed the sound of hurried footsteps echoing in the hallway. The police were close. But was it close enough? Marcus stood outside the old brick building, the note still clenched in his hand. He wasn't sure what had brought him here, whether it was the woman's words, the nagging feeling in his gut, or just the need to finally understand something about his own life. The entrance was dark, the metal door slightly ajar. He swallowed hard. Was he really going to do this? Step inside a place he didn't know, follow a stranger's words? But then he thought about how she had looked at him. Not with pity, not with fear, but with something else. Something that almost felt like recognition. He pushed the door open. The hallway smelled of old paper and dust, the air thick with the weight of something unspoken. His footsteps were nearly silent on the worn floor. There was no sign of her. No sound, no movement. Just the hum of an old ceiling light flickering overhead. And then, a voice.
Low.
Familiar. "You came." Marcus turned sharply, his breath catching. The woman stood at the end of the hall, her face partially hidden in the dim glow. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice steady despite the questions swirling in his head. She took a slow step forward. "I've been waiting for you, Marcus." His throat tightened. "Why?" She hesitated, as if deciding how much to tell him. Then, she pulled something from her coat pocket, a small, folded piece of paper. Marcus frowned as she extended it toward him. "Read it," she said softly. With shaky fingers, he took the note and unfolded it. His eyes moved over the words, his breath hitching as he realized what he was looking at.
A name. A date.
His birth name. The date he had been taken into the foster system. His hands clenched around the paper. "How do you know this?" The woman's expression softened. "Because, Marcus, I was there." A chill ran down his spine. And in that moment he knew. This wasn't just about a kind stranger on a bus. This was about his past. A past someone had been keeping from him. Emma's legs burned as she sprinted down the hallway, her breath ragged. The man was ahead of her, turning sharply around a corner, but she refused to let him out of her sight. The sirens were getting closer, flashing red and blue lights bouncing against the walls through the windows. She skidded to a stop as she reached another classroom door, this one slightly open, a faint noise coming from inside. Emma's heart clenched. "Lily." She pushed the door open. And there, curled in the corner, was her daughter. Lily's small hands clutched Max's harness, her face pressed against his fur. She was shaking, her breath uneven. Emma's entire body sagged with relief as she rushed forward, dropping to her knees beside her daughter.
"Oh, sweetheart."
I'm here. I'm right here. Lily flinched at first, but when Emma wrapped her arms around her, she melted into her mother's embrace. Max let out a soft whimper, his tail thumping once against the floor before he pressed himself closer to them. Emma stroked Lily's hair, whispering soothing words, even as fear still clung to the edges of her mind. It's okay. You're safe now. But Lily's next words sent another wave of dread crashing over her. He said he's coming back. Emma stiffened.
Who?
Lily's fingers tightened in her mother's shirt, her voice barely above a whisper. The man who took me. Emma's blood ran cold. The police sirens wailed just outside. But somehow she knew this wasn't over. Emma's grip on Lily tightened as she tried to steady her own breath. The police were outside, but the man, the one who had taken her daughter, was still somewhere in the school. Maybe he had already slipped away, disappearing into the night before anyone could stop him. Or maybe he was still here, watching, waiting. She forced herself to focus on Lily, brushing a hand over her daughter's hair. Sweetheart, did he hurt you? Lily shook her head against Emma's shoulder.
No.
But he told me not to move. He said if I was quiet, he wouldn't be gone long. Emma swallowed hard. Her body was still buzzing with adrenaline, but she forced her voice to stay calm. Did you hear where he went? Lily hesitated. I think he was on the phone with someone. He said he needed more time. That he wasn't finished yet. Emma's stomach twisted. Not finished? What did that mean? A sharp knock on the door frame made her jump. She turned quickly, shielding Lily, but it was just a police officer, a tall man with a steady, reassuring presence. Ma'am, are you okay? He asked, scanning the room before kneeling beside them. Emma nodded, even though she felt far from okay. She's here. She's safe. The officer's radio crackled. Suspect is not in sight. Possible exit through the north wing. Requesting backup. Emma's pulse pounded. He was getting away. The officer glanced at her. Ma'am, we need to get you both outside. My team is securing the building, but we don't want to take any risks. Emma hesitated. Every part of her wanted to stay, to help find the man who had done this. But Lily needed her. She had to get her daughter somewhere safe first. Carefully, she helped Lily to her feet, keeping a firm arm around her while Max stayed close. They followed the officer through the hallway, past classrooms that now felt eerily empty, their footsteps echoing through the silence. But just as they neared the front entrance, Emma caught a glimpse of something through the glass doors. A figure, moving quickly. Her breath hitched. The man was outside. And he wasn't alone. Marcus stared at the woman in front of him, his mind racing. She had been there? What did that even mean? His past had always been a blur of missing pieces, shuffled from one place to the next, never knowing the full truth about where he had come from. Now, standing in this dimly lit hallway, the truth felt closer than ever and more terrifying. His fingers tightened around the paper. Tell me everything. The woman let out a slow breath, glancing around as if making sure no one else was listening. I worked for the system. Years ago. I saw things I wasn't supposed to see. I knew things I wasn't supposed to know. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. What things? She hesitated. You weren't just another kid in the system, Marcus. You were taken. The words slammed into him like a punch. His stomach clenched, his mind scrambling to process what she had just said. Taken? His voice came out hoarse. That's not possible. But deep down, something in him whispered that it was. He had always felt like something was missing, like there was a part of his story that didn't add up. He had convinced himself it was just the way life worked. Some people got lucky, others didn't. But now, his hands started shaking. Who? He demanded. Who took me? The woman took a step closer, lowering her voice. It wasn't random, Marcus. Someone wanted you gone. And now that I've found you, they'll know. A chill crawled up his spine. Who are they? The woman glanced over her shoulder, suddenly tense. We don't have much time. There's more you need to know, but not here. Marcus's heartbeat thumped against his ribs. He didn't know if he could trust her. He didn't even know her name. But he knew one thing for sure. He couldn't walk away now. Emma barely had time to react before the police officer noticed the movement outside. He reached for his radio, his tone sharp. Suspect spotted outside the main entrance. We need backup now. Emma pulled Lily closer, keeping her body between her daughter and the glass doors. She could see the man clearly now. He was moving toward a dark SUV parked at the curb. Another figure stood beside him, partially obscured by the shadows. Lily tugged at her sleeve. Mom. Emma forced herself to sound calm. It's okay, sweetheart. Just stay close. The officer motioned for them to step back, keeping his gaze locked on the suspects outside. More police cars were pulling into the parking lot, their flashing lights illuminating the scene in bursts of red and blue. For a brief second, Emma thought they had him, that the nightmare was about to end. But then, the man outside did something unexpected. Instead of running, he turned, looked straight at her, and smiled. Emma's stomach dropped. The second figure stepped into the light. Emma's breath caught. It was a woman, and something about her sent a chill through Emma's veins. The woman leaned in, whispering something to the man. He nodded once. Then, before the police could reach them, they slipped into the SUV. Tires screeched against the pavement. The car sped away. Emma's heart pounded in her chest. They were gone. But she knew they would be back. Emma's hands were still shaking as she held Lily close, watching the SUV disappear into the night. The flashing lights of the police cars cast long shadows across the pavement, but they weren't enough to chase away the dread creeping into her chest. The man had smiled at her. Not in fear. Not in desperation. It was a knowing smile. One that sent a shiver through her bones. The officer beside her was already speaking into his radio, calling in more units, setting up a search for the vehicle. But Emma had a sinking feeling it wouldn't matter. Whoever that man was, whoever that woman was, they had planned this. They weren't running. They were simply waiting. Lily clung to Emma's side, her small hands gripping tightly, as if afraid to let go. Mom, she whispered, her voice barely audible over the commotion. Emma crouched beside her, pushing a few strands of hair back from her daughter's face. It's okay, sweetheart. You're safe now. Lily shook her head.
No, Mom.
I heard them talking before he left. They weren't here just for me. Emma's stomach twisted. What do you mean? Lily swallowed hard, her voice trembling. He said he needed to finish what he started. That he wasn't done with. She hesitated. Emma's breath caught in her throat. With who, Lily? Lily's fingers curled into the fabric of Emma's sleeve. With you. A chill ran down Emma's spine. She barely had time to process what that meant before another voice cut through the chaos. Emma? She turned sharply, her pulse still racing. A figure was moving toward her, stepping past the flashing police lights. At first, she didn't recognize him in the haze of panic and adrenaline. But then, Marcus. His name came out in a breath of disbelief. She hadn't seen him in years, not since they were kids. But now, standing in front of her, older, taller, his expression tight with urgency, he looked like a ghost from her past. What are you doing here? Emma stammered, still holding Lily close. Marcus glanced at the police, then back at her. I think I might have the answer to what's happening. His jaw tensed. But we don't have much time. Emma's heart pounded. This night was spiraling into something she couldn't control, and now, somehow, Marcus was part of it. She didn't know what was coming next, but she knew one thing for certain. The danger wasn't over. It was only beginning. Emma's mind raced as she stared at Marcus, her pulse pounding in her ears. Lily's words still echoed in her head. He wasn't done with you. But how could this be about her? She had never seen that man before. She had no connection to him. At least, none that she knew of. Marcus glanced around, lowering his voice. Emma, I think this is bigger than just Lily. I think it's about both of us. Emma frowned. What are you talking about? Marcus hesitated, then pulled a crumpled piece of paper from his pocket and handed it to her. Emma unfolded it with shaky fingers, her eyes scanning the familiar name at the top. Her name. And beneath it, Marcus's. Emma's stomach dropped. It was a document. An old one. Some kind of case file. Marcus's voice was tight. That woman, the one with him, I think she worked in the system.
She knew things about me.
And if your name is here too, that means this goes back further than we realized. Emma's breath caught as a terrible thought crept into her mind. You think we were taken? Marcus nodded. Not just us. Others too. But someone covered it up. Someone made sure we never found out the truth. Emma's chest tightened. None of this made sense. Why would anyone take children, separate them, erase their pasts? And why come after her now? Before she could say another word, the police radio crackled. Suspect's vehicle located. Abandoned near an industrial lot outside town. No sign of occupants. Emma's stomach twisted. He was out there. Watching. Waiting. Then Lily gripped her hand, her small fingers trembling. Mom, I remember something else. Emma knelt beside her. What is it, sweetheart? Lily swallowed hard. Before he left, he said something about a place. A name. She closed her eyes, trying to remember. Bridgepoint. Marcus's breath hitched. Bridgepoint. He exchanged a look with Emma. That's where I was before I went into foster care. Emma's heart pounded. If that place was connected to both of them, then maybe that was where the answers were. The officer nearby spoke into his radio. Dispatch any known locations for Bridgepoint? A beat of silence, then a voice responded. Bridgepoint Children's Home. Shut down over a decade ago. No current records of activity. Marcus exhaled. That's it. That's where we need to go. Emma hesitated. Every instinct told her to get Lily far away from this. But if this was about her past, if this was about Marcus's past, then walking away wasn't an option. She looked down at her daughter. Lily, I need you to stay with the officers, okay? They'll keep you safe. Lily's grip tightened. But Mom. Emma kissed her forehead. I'll be okay. I promise. Lily's eyes shimmered with fear, but she nodded. Emma turned to Marcus. Let's go. The drive to Bridgepoint was tense, the night stretching around them in eerie silence. The abandoned home loomed in the distance, its boarded-up windows like empty eyes staring back at them. Emma shivered. Are you sure about this? Marcus clenched his jaw. We have to be. They stepped inside, the air thick with dust and memories long forgotten. The wooden floors creaked beneath their feet as they moved cautiously down the hall. Then, a noise. A whisper of movement. Emma's breath hitched. Marcus motioned for her to stay back as he stepped forward. But before he could react, a figure emerged from the shadows. The man.
He didn't run this time.
He simply stood there, watching them, that same unsettling smile on his face. Welcome home, he said softly. Emma's skin crawled. Who are you? The man tilted his head. You don't remember, do you? Emma's pulse pounded. Remember what? He stepped closer. You were supposed to forget. They made sure of it. But some things don't stay buried. His gaze flickered to Marcus. Especially not the truth. Marcus's fists clenched. What truth? The man's smile widened. That you were never lost. You were hidden. Emma's breath caught. Hidden? The air in the room felt thick, suffocating. Then, the man took a slow step back, reaching into his coat. Emma's instincts screamed at her. Marcus. Before she could finish, the lights flickered, then went out. Darkness swallowed them whole. And then, chaos erupted. The darkness swallowed Emma whole, pressing in on all sides like a living thing. Her breath came fast and shallow as she reached blindly for Marcus. Somewhere in the shadows, she heard a scuffle. Quick, sharp movements, the sound of a struggle. Then a low grunt and the thud of something heavy hitting the ground. Marcus, she whispered. I'm here, his voice came, strained but steady. Stay close. A scraping sound echoed through the room, then the man's voice, calm, almost amused. It's funny, isn't it? How the past has a way of finding you. Emma's pulse pounded. What do you want from us? A long pause, then a slow chuckle. I don't want anything. I just came to finish what was started. Before Emma could react, a sudden beam of light cut through the darkness. Marcus had found his phone and switched on the flashlight. The man stood a few feet away, his expression calm, as if this was all just a game to him. But there was something in his eyes now, something flickering beneath the surface. Emma forced herself to stand tall, even as her heart pounded. Tell us the truth. No more riddles. No more games. What happened to us? The man exhaled, tilting his head. For a moment, he almost looked sad. They took you, he said finally. Not just you two. Others. Children who would never be missed, who could be erased without questions. It was supposed to be clean. A way to build a future for people willing to pay for it. You were moved, given new lives, placed into different homes. And then, everything fell apart. Emma's throat tightened. Who did this? His expression darkened. People with power. People who needed it buried. He looked at Marcus. And people like me, we made sure it stayed buried. Emma's stomach twisted. But why come after me now? Why take Lily? His gaze didn't waver. Because you weren't supposed to remember. Something inside Emma snapped. I didn't remember. You brought this to me. His jaw tensed. Not by choice. The words hung in the air like a heavy weight. Then, the sound of sirens pierced the silence. Emma felt her knees nearly give out in relief. The police. The man stiffened, glancing toward the boarded-up window where red and blue lights flashed against the night sky. He let out a slow breath and held up his hands. Looks like my time's up. Marcus didn't hesitate. He lunged forward, grabbing the man's arms and forcing him to the ground just as the police burst in. The room flooded with light as officers moved in, weapons drawn, shouting commands. It was over. Emma barely registered the next few minutes. She was dimly aware of Marcus speaking with the officers, of the man being handcuffed and led away, of the tension finally breaking like a dam inside her. Then, Mom. Emma turned just in time to see Lily running toward her, her little face streaked with tears. Emma dropped to her knees, wrapping her arms tightly around her daughter, breathing in the familiar scent of her hair. Lily sobbed into her shoulder. I was so scared. Emma held her even tighter. I know, sweetheart. It's over now. You're safe. Marcus crouched beside them, rubbing a hand over his face, exhausted but relieved. We got our answers. Maybe not all of them, but enough. Emma nodded. She knew there would be more questions, more investigations, more pieces of the past to uncover. But for now, she didn't care. All that mattered was that Lily was safe. As the officers wrapped up their work, one of them approached Emma and Marcus. We ran the suspect's prints. His real name is Richard Latham. He was involved in several missing child cases from years ago, but every time the trail went cold. Until now. Emma swallowed. What happens next? The officer gave a reassuring nod. He's going away for a long time. And with everything we've uncovered tonight, this case is just getting started. There's a lot of people who are going to have to answer for what happened. Emma exhaled, feeling some of the weight finally lift off her shoulders. As she held Lily close, she looked at Marcus. Thank you. For being here. For not letting me face this alone. Marcus gave a small, tired smile. We've both been running from the past for too long. Maybe now we don't have to anymore. Emma nodded. She didn't know what came next. Maybe there would be more revelations, more difficult truths to face. But for now, she had her daughter. She had her life. And for the first time in a long time, she wasn't afraid anymore.